Vladimir Vladimirovich, your interview with Tatiana Carlos has already got 1 billion views, but there are many different positive reactions. Positive, and of course we can understand the comments coming from Western leaders, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the Chancellor of Germany. They named "I'm here." You attempt to explain the reasons for the start of the special operation, to justify it by the threat of NATO attacking Russia, is absurd and ridiculous. What do you think about such assessments? Firstly, it's good that they watch and listen to what I'm saying. If for some reason related to them today, if we can't have a direct dialogue, then we must be thankful to Mr. Carlson for that.
We can do this through him as a middleman. So what they are watching, listening to is good. But the fact that they are distorting what I said is bad. And they distort the map. Why? Because I never said anything like that. I didn't say that the start of our special military operation in Ukraine is related to the threat of NATO attacking Russia. Where is this in my interview? There is a record. Let them show where exactly I was talking about this. He said, I was talking about something else. I was talking about how we were constantly deceived about NATO not expanding to the east. By the way, this was said, first and foremost, through the then Secretary General of NATO, and he was a representative of the Federal Republic of Germany. He said it inches east, then 5 expansions, partial deception. Us, of course, worried and worries the possibility of being pulled into England. NATO of Ukraine, as it threatens our security, I see it so, but the immediate trigger was complete denial of today's Ukrainian authorities from the execution of the Minsk agreement and the ongoing attack with numerous human casualties to the republics of Donbass that we did not recognize for 8 years. The People's Republic of Bulgaria and the Donetsk People's Republic, who turned to us in the end, asking for acknowledgement of the hopelessness of resolving issues within the framework of the Minsk agreements. We recognized them, then made a treaty with them about friendship in mutual aid and in accordance with the Charter of the Volumetric Nations. They fulfilled their obligations under this treaty. As I said, we didn't start the war, we're just continuing it. We're trying to stop it. Initially, we tried to do it through peaceful means, through peaceful Minsk agreements. As it turned out later, we were fooled here too, because both the former Chancellor of FRG and the President of France acknowledged and openly stated that they did not intend to not to fulfill these agreements of ours, but merely to buy time to further arm the Ukrainian regime. They successfully did it. The only regret we might have is that they started our active actions earlier, thinking we were dealing with Putin. Decent people.
They criticized Carlos right away, and before the interview, and now after the interview, they blame him for supposedly there were not many tough questions. Supposedly he was too soft with you, and you felt very comfortable with him. What do you think? Did you overwhelm the American journalists with your authority?
I think Jo Carlson, when I say your, I mean that he is a representative of your journalistic guild. A dangerous man, and here's why. Because frankly, I thought he would be the one to act aggressively and will be asking these so-called burning questions. I wasn't just ready for this, I wanted it. Because it would allow me to respond as sharply as, in my opinion, it would have given a certain specificity to our whole conversation. But he chose another tactic. He tried to interrupt me several times, but surprisingly for a Western journalist, was patient. Listened to my lengthy conversations, especially regarding history. It didn't give me a reason. Do what I would be ready for. Therefore, to be honest, I didn't get much pleasure from this interview, but it went on. He went hard at his fate, judging his plan, and he fulfilled his plan. But how meaningful it ultimately turned out to be is not for me to judge it. Just viewers, listeners, maybe readers of the material they receive, she has to make her choice. Following this interview, there were immediate sounds of calls to sanction Tikkun Carlos. I hear talks that he might even get arrested. Is that even possible? And Sanch is sitting, and that's it. Almost no one remembers him anymore. So only his close people speak. And such are the characteristics of a public consciousness. It goes away, but truth be told, Assange was at least accused of leaking some state secrets to stick on, because it didn't touch any secrets. Nevertheless, theoretically, everything is possible these days. In today's America, in today's United States, from a perspective, but Carfley himself would have. That would be sad. I don't really envy him, but it's his choice. He knew what he was getting into, but from a certain perspective, so that people around the world understand what it is. Modern, liberal, democratic, in quotes, dictatorship, which is vividly represented in today's ruling class in the US. That would probably be all right. They would then show their true face.
Carlson said that after the interview, just to dispel doubts now, which arose. That's the question I have. Carlson said that after the interview, you had another conversation. Now everyone is interested in what,
some people, he went through his plan, as I already said. And as I understood, and that's it. He didn't go beyond this plan. Wind up additionally those whom the journalist did not raise in the conversation with me. Therefore, the question of demonizing Russia is associated with the same, with interethnic events, with Jewish pogroms in the Russian Empire. Well, of course, here, this should have also appeared in the course of official part. But here's one of the topics we talked about when the cameras were off. This is exactly what the United States Secretary of State was talking about. He mentioned this several times, Mr. Blinken, about that. His relatives, his great-grandfather fled from Russia, from Jewish pogroms, and in different countries, peace in Europe. This topic constantly comes up. It arises with the aim of demonizing Russia, to show what barbarians are here, what villains and robbers live here. In fact, if you take a look at what was said, look at today's Secretary of State, and not at the political slogans, but at the essence of the problems. A lot becomes clear here, like in our archives. All of this is true. Mr. Blinken's great-grandfather indeed left Russia. Igor Negorov was with you, from the Russian Empire. He was born, as far as I know, somewhere in Poltava province, and then lived and left from Kiev. A question arises. Does Mr. Blinken consider this to be inherently Russian territory? Kiev and the surrounding territory, first. Second, if he says he ran away from Russia, from Jewish pogroms, at least, I want to underline this at minimum. He believes that there was no Ukraine in 1905, in 1904, specifically in 1904, great-grandfather, about Mr. Bellingen. He left Kiev for the United States, So there was no Ukraine there if he says he ran from Russia.
Judging by everything, Lord darn, you are our man.
Kozyrev makes such public
Good luck.
statements.
This could lead to failure. Recently, German media published articles about the fact that the grandfather of the current German foreign minister, Annalena Baerbock, he was a fervent Nazi, and here considering
You are
what's
fevers
happening between
by
them,
our countries in recent years. It turns out that perhaps on some genetic level in this country, such a virus of National Socialism is spreading. But this is also one of, under the guise of extreme nationalism. By the way, if I just thought about this weather, they primarily took place in the Russian Empire, in the southwest, in the territory of today's Ukraine, specifically in Kiev, as I mentioned, in 1905. If Mr. Blinken's ancestor left in 1904, so the first pogrom in Kiev was a mass one in 1905, so it's the great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather could only learn about this from the newspaper or from the information, the one who came from Kiev at that time. In general, they are such mass events, negative ones. They arose at the start of the 19th century, I believe in 1920. The first massive pogrom in 21. Undoubtedly, these crimes were in Odessa, then in Melitopol, in Zhytomyr, in other cities of today's Ukraine, were in Belarus. A couple of such events took place in Siberia, but the first one was associated with a murder, the ecumenical patriarch of Constantinople. And then the Greeks, who were breaking through there, thought that the Jews were somehow involved in the attempt on the patriarch, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that they resisted. By the way, the riots, resistance squads, which consisted of Jewish and Russian youth, the government gave appropriate assessments, even the Tsarist one, and tried to interfere with this. The tragic event was dealt with, including with the help of the army, but I repeat, this is a separate topic. As for nationalism and Nazism, fascism, you know, I'll say maybe a strange thing. Well, first of all, the lady herself,
lanterns on birch blocks.
Baerbock, yes, Baerbock, to get her surname right, they represent the Green Party. Many representatives of this part of the European political spectrum, they speculate on people's fears. They stir up these fears in people before those events that can occur in the world due to climate change. Then speculating on these fears, its political line, fueled by themselves, distant what they came to power with. This is what is happening in Germany right now. Let's say coal generation has increased. It was already higher than in Russia in the energy structure. And there were more, and now there are even more. So where is this green agenda? That's firstly. Secondly, such people like the Minister of Tutelary Affairs of Germany, they, of course, she in this case is, of course, hostile to our country, to Russia. But in my opinion, she is hostile even to her own side. Because, well, it's hard to imagine that a politician of such rank, he treated the economic interests of his country, his people, with such disdain. I will not delve into details and specifics right now, but in practice, it happens, we see it. Well, the next part of what I want to say perhaps will sound dissonant to what I just said. I do not believe that today's generations of Germans must bear full political responsibility for everything that Nazi Germany did. We cannot place the responsibility for what Hitler and his accomplices did on the people of today's generation. And not only in Germany, but also in other parts of the world. I think that would be unfair. Yeah. And in general, apply this label to all the German people. I'm in an unfair position. This is abuse, just abuse. The thing is, the people have survived. The peoples of the Soviet Union have survived. I think that this is, well, dishonorable and irrelevant. We need to start from today's realities to see who is really there, what it does and what policy it will work. By the way, in this regard, I think it would be useful to do this. Now, in many countries, even in those where it seemed it shouldn't have sounded like a political leitmotif, but unfortunately, it sounds like some sort of exceptional folk interruptions, some kind of chosenness and so on. Well, listen, this is how Nazism began. Huh? So if this is so widespread, it should also at least to think about, to establish this anti-fascist, anti-Nazi propaganda and work on a global scale, on, I repeat, a global level. And moreover, it should not be done at some governmental level. It will only be effective if it is done at the level of public awareness and public initiative. And it doesn't matter which country in the world it happens in.
In the European Union, there's practically a panic over the possible return of Donald Trump to office, the president of the USA. And recent statements, literally, in these days, Trump, European leaders in general, they discourage this. I do not hide. Trump said that the US should protect European countries only if the European countries are willing to pay for it. Here, why did such relationships develop between Europe, European leaders, politicians, and Donald Trump?
Oh, Trump, however, was always called a non-system politician. He has his own view on the topic of how the US should develop relations with their allies. And there was a spark before. Here is the United States exit from the Kyoto agreements in the field of ecology. There was a spark then too, but the then President of the United States made the decision that the USA would withdraw from these agreements, despite all the attractiveness of the environmental agenda, because he believed it was harmful American economy. Well, that's it. He made the final decision. Matter is closed. And no matter how much European leaders criticized him, he did it. Yes, corrected later. How does Trump's stance differ in this regard? There's no particular reason. He wanted to make the Europeans increase their defense spending, then let them pay. We're the ones protecting them. We've opened up the nuclear umbrella over their heads and so on. Well, I don't know. Let them figure it out. It's their problem. But probably from his point of view, there is some logic in this. From the Europeans' perspective, there is no logic. And they would like it to, from the United States and beyond, it was carried out for free on some
points that
have formed since the establishment of NATO. That's their business. I believe there's no point in it. It doesn't make any sense. There's only one purpose. It's a tool of US foreign policy. If the USA thinks this tool is not needed, it's their decision.
And the current US President Biden gives more and more reasons for the whole world to discuss his health every day. This is the president of one of the largest nuclear powers, and yet we all basically on a daily basis we see, to put it mildly, extremely specific scenes. When you see and hear all this, what do you think?
I am thinking about how the US is ramping up its domestic campaign. The election campaign, it's getting more and more like that, acute forms, and in my opinion, it's incorrect for us to interfere in this process. Listen, I once met Biden in Switzerland, indeed a few years ago, 3 years. And then they were already talking about him being incapable. I saw nothing like that. Well, yes, he was picking at his paper. Honestly, I picked at mine too. There was nothing like that. Hit his head when getting out of the helicopter, and this helicopter. But who among us hasn't bumped their head somewhere? So let the first one not even throw it in his hands, in my opinion. I'm not a doctor and not considering myself entitled to give some comments on this matter. We need to focus not on this, but on the political position. I believe that the position of today's administration is highly detrimental and wrong. I've spoken about this to President Biden in the past.
Well, the question from 4 years ago is relevant again. Who's better for us, Biden or Trump?
Biden, he is a more experienced person. He is predictable. An old school politician, but will work with anyone. The leader of the USA whom the American people will trust.
I wanted to return to your interview. We recalled the statements of current leaders of Germany and Britain, but the one who you were talking about also spoke. You said in an interview with Carlson, and where now this is Johnson, according to his confessions about Rakama, he's the one who ordered Kiev not to negotiate with Moscow, but to win, fight. If only the Kiev authorities hadn't listened to them back then. Let's put it this way. Suggestions how events might unfold further.
So, Mr. Rahe, I said it myself. He is, well, you look synchronously. We didn't force him to speak. He said what he thought. Why he said it, I don't know. Such things. Even person. But he did say if we had followed those agreements about, if they had fully complied with the agreements reached in Istanbul, the war would have ended a year and a half ago. He said so. We need to...
That's when it goes...
I believe Mr. Carlson's interview should be more in sync with Mr. Arhamas. Why?
To be continued.
The West, particularly the Anglo-Saxon world, has taken such a stance. Former Prime Minister Mr. Johnson could not come on his own initiative without consulting with Washington on this. Surely such consultations were not only held, but I think he just went on a business trip. At the expense of the American administration, they paid him a business trip for it, so he laid out his position there, that we have to fight with Russia until the last Ukrainian, it was in heaps, of course, but until the victorious end, and on to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, apparently. They were counting on such a result. Well, just as I told the gentleman, Karasunov, can I repeat to you? If they see that the result is not coming out, it seems we need to make corrections. But that's a question, the art of politics, because politics, as we know, is the art of compromise.